Alright, so when playing Pokemon TCG, and I'm pretty sure you've come across this as well, I'm pretty sure it's not just me that's thought about this, but there's a rule that can be really frustrating, that is limiting and can change whether you win or lose the game before you even play a single card. And this rule is the mulligan rule. Now I want to break down this rule as to why it can screw you over before your game has even started. And I also want to tell you why I think I can fix this rule, because I really think it's a good idea, and I would also love to hear what you think about it, specifically about changing this rule, or how we can change this rule, if you're here, you probably are a Pokemon TCG player. You know the basic rules. When you draw 7 cards, if you don't have a basic Pokemon, you reshuffle, draw another 7 cards, as many times as it takes until you get a basic Pokemon. And then for every time you mulligan and your opponent doesn't, they have the option to draw an extra card. The problem is this with, if you draw a rubbish hand with a basic Pokemon, your chances of winning drop drastically, especially if you cannot do anything with that hand. It's just a dead hand. Does this happen often? Not really, especially if you've built your deck well and it includes enough tutor cards to help you fix your hand. But with every game you play, there's always a small chance that you'll draw a hand that is unplayable, no matter how well you've built your deck. Statistically, it just happens. There's nothing you can do about it. It's the luck part of the game. But I hate that a game can be so heavily influenced just because you were unlucky and got a bad hand. I also hate hearing my opponent use that their bad hand is the excuse about why I won. Not because of whether they play badly, but there isn't really any way to determine it, because if they did have a bad hand, it does give them a disadvantage. And how many times have you played at your LGS and you have heard or been tempted to use this excuse, especially from your opponents, or yourself have found this bad hand, lose a game, and you know you could have won that game if you just had 1 or 2 different cards in your hand at the time? Maybe we need this excuse in the game just to keep our self-esteem going while we're busy playing these. But I believe I could fix this rule with one small adjustment. This rule wouldn't change the current rule, it's just a little extra to add on at the end. And it's simple. We do everything the same from the beginning to the point where we draw and we receive the basic Pokemon in our hand. We have the remaining cards left in our hand. We play the basics that we want to put down as our opponent does. Then the additional card drawing that either ourselves will take or our opponent will take happen. But then after that, the remaining cards in our hand, you can have a look at them, you see them, it's like, oh no, I'm in trouble. These are bad cards, what am I going to do? Well, what we could potentially do is those 6 or 5 remaining, or 4 depending on how many basic Pokemon you get and you actually put down into the Pokemon zones, you can take those cards, reshuffle them back into your deck, and draw the same amount of cards. So for instance, if you have your 7, 1 basic Pokemon, you play your basic Pokemon down into the active zone. You have remaining 6 cards which you see that are just unplayable, and you can see it's just going to put you in such a bad situation. You take those 6, you shuffle them back into your deck, and you draw a new 6. Not 7, 6, because you put 6 back, you draw a new 6. And from those 6, you can then decide, okay, I'm happy with this. And then from those 6 cards, you put 1 of them to the bottom of your deck. And that's where the disadvantage, or that slight disadvantage that you would receive from taking an extra mulligan at this point. So you do reduce the amount of cards in your hand, but effectively 5 decent cards is much better than 6 useless cards, or even 4 decent cards are much better than 6 useless cards. And so this at least gives us the opportunity where we may have something that can fix our hand, or something that can allow us to draw into cards that we really need at the time. Simple fix, easy to do. It doesn't affect our opponent in any way. Obviously, it only affects our hand. And for each time you do it, you keep putting a card back to the bottom. So for instance, now you draw your new 6. They're all terrible. You want to do it again. You do it again until you're happy with the hand. And for each time you do it, you have to put a card back. So if you do it 3 times with the 6 cards, you have to put 3 cards back to the bottom, which means you got 3 cards left in your hand. Now, if those 3 cards are decent, you probably wouldn't mind. Yes, you are at a disadvantage because your hand has a lot less cards than your opponent, but I feel that this can reduce the opportunity for you and your opponent to use the excuse that I lost because I had a bad hand. And it also takes away the opportunity, or not the opportunity, sorry, it's not an opportunity at all. It takes away the disadvantage of having a terrible hand after you hit a basic Pokemon. But for now, that's not part of the game, and you know what, that's okay. I still enjoy the game, it's a lot of fun. And if you do come across a situation where you have a bad hand, you know, there's a few things that we can do currently. If you're playing Pokemon TCG Live, you can concede and don't waste your time, just move on and find a new game. And if you do end up with a bad hand at your LGS, just play with a smile, enjoy the game. Remember, you do have the excuse to use at the end, just in case. And you never know, you may pull out an insane victory that will definitely make a great story. So please do like and subscribe, and thank you for your support.